we still have the problem of overclassification in the government, which does not excuse anybody from taking documents marked classified to put in boxes or show to friends.
Hello and welcome to GZERO World. I'm Ian Bremmer, and today I'm going to tell you a secret. America's classification process doesn't work very well. Whether it's classifying material that has no basis for remaining secret or shuffling top secret documents behind a cheap shower curtain, it's high time we talk about how we keep things confidential. And joining me for that is a woman who knows more than she'd like to admit about the darkest corners of American government. Former 9-time Congresswoman Jane Harman. She served as the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee. And later we travel back in time to the country's first whistleblower case. But first, when Henry Kissinger was tapped by President Nixon to be his national security advisor, he'd served in the military, but otherwise never worked in government. But the young Harvard professor had an acquaintance who had spent years as a senior intelligence analyst at the Pentagon and the Rand Corporation, and this acquaintance did his best to prepare Kissinger for the secret world ahead.
And I said, Henry, you're about to get a lot of clearances higher than top secret that you did not know existed. That's going to have a sequence of effects on you. First, a great exhilaration that you're getting all this amazing information that you didn't know even existed. And the next phase is you'll feel like a fool for not having known of any of this. But that won't last long. Very soon, you'll come to think that everyone else is foolish.
Who was this acquaintance? Daniel Ellsberg, who would go on to become the world's most famous whistleblower. Ellsberg leaked the Pentagon Papers, 7,000 pages of top secret Vietnam War documents, to the New York Times back in 1971. While Kissinger denies it, it's been widely reported that he called Daniel Ellsberg, and I quote, the most dangerous man in America. But back to that story that Ellsberg recounted. In that 1968 meeting, Ellsberg was warning Kissinger about the pitfalls of knowing too much. But in the 5 decades since, and until his death in June at the age of 92, Ellsberg spoke out about the dangers we face as a nation by keeping too many secrets. And he's not alone. The 9/11 Commission found that a lack of information sharing between agencies like the CIA, the FBI, and the NSA prevented the US government from foiling the terrorist attacks that day. A key reason was the overclassification of information. An estimated 50 million documents are classified each year, though the exact number is unknown, not because it's classified, but because the government just can't keep track of it all. In the words of the former US Solicitor General Erwin Griswold, some secrets are not worth keeping. It's hard for the American public to know what its government is up to if so much of that work is classified. It also forces journalists to weigh the risks of disclosing information to the public against the possibility of prosecution under the Espionage Act. There are, of course, plenty of good and important reasons to classify information. We don't want Kim Jong-un or Ayatollah Khamenei to get their hands on our nuclear codes. But beyond national security concerns, a big contributor to overclassification comes down to incentives. If you're a government employee, the risk of classifying something that doesn't need to be classified is low. But if you unclassify something that you shouldn't, then you're in trouble. It's also about control. Classification protects the government against revelations of mistakes, false predictions, or other embarrassing outcomes that the rest of us like to call accountability. Here, once more, is Ellsberg himself speaking to a British journalist in 1972, over a year after leaking the Pentagon Papers and while awaiting trial in Los Angeles.
If the president can really keep secret indefinitely, and at his own decision, essentially without appeal, this sort of information, both from Congress and the public, he really escapes from all accountability, and it's hard to say that our foreign policy is in any way democratic.
Here to talk about all things classified, including those documents in Biden's garage and Trump's bathroom, is former Congresswoman Jane Harman. She served in Congress for 9 terms, and she was the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee after 9/11. In other words, Jane knows a secret or two. What follows are the unclassified parts of our conversation. Jane Harman, welcome back to GZERO World.
Happy to be back.
So I want to talk about classification. There's so much in the news about all these people, including the former president, doing things that may well be illegal. But you've been involved with this topic for a long time. I wanted to ask you first, go back to 9/11, and you were very concerned about information sharing in the government coming off of the 9/11 Commission. Tell me what it was that you found so alarming.
Well, the problem is that there are good reasons to classify documents to protect sources and methods. If somebody found out information in a surreptitious way, let's imagine a CIA operative inside Russia, and the fact that that happened, or even the name of that person is disclosed, that person is likely to be pushed out of a window. So we don't want to reveal the sources, even technical sources, satellites and where they might be located, that lead us to find important information about the motives and intentions of our adversaries. A bad reason to classify is to protect your turf. You don't want other people to know what you know, or to protect yourself from embarrassment, meaning you screwed up and you don't want people to know that happened. That is not a justification to classify, and yet people do it all over the government, and there are multiple classification systems, and that prevents us from curing the problem we faced on 9/11, which was when the need to know trumped the need to share. And we had information about these hijackers. We knew that there were people training on airlines. We had some other information we had an FBI informant in San Diego, and yet that information was not put together in the FBI and in the government to lead us to know that there was possibly a plot inside the United States involving airplanes. So I authored legislation a bit later, but we still have the problem of overclassification in the government, which does not excuse anybody from taking documents marked classified to put in boxes or show to friends.
So if we have an overclassification problem in the U.S., do we also have an overclearance problem in the U.S.? I mean, I know that millions of Americans, either full-time employees or consultants to various parts of the U.S. government, have some level of clearance, of security clearance, which means they have access to some level of overclassified information. What do we think about that process, Jane?
Well, it's kind of circular. We overclassify, so yes, we overclear. Our clearance process is very cumbersome. And for example, in the early 2000s when we were in Afghanistan and Iraq, I was very much in favor of getting language speakers who spoke dialogues to read some of the information we were getting through so-called technical means, that means non-humans, or humans, because they would understand better what the words meant than would somebody who studied Arabic at Harvard University, unless that person were native. Problem, couldn't clear those people because they had a grandma in Baghdad, and everyone was afraid that they would be some form of blackmail against them. So what I argued we needed was a tiered classification system where you can clear people only up to a certain amount. In other words, some person who speaks a regional dialect could be given papers to read but not told the context of the papers. So that person would just translate the language, and then somebody with a higher classification level could put that together.
So of the classified briefings and documents that you are now exposed to, what percentage of those today would you say, in your view, actually needs to be classified?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't think all of it needs to be classified. I totally agree. I think.
But is it closer to 90 or is it closer to 10?
No, it's not 10. It's not 10.
It's not 10. I guess let me ask the question in a slightly more direct way. Do you think that you could do your job equally well without a clearance?
No. I just had a series of briefings in this role that I now have on threats, especially the China threat. And there was information in that briefing that I don't think I could get from open sources. And I think having that information makes me better informed to help make the decisions for this commission.
So let's talk about some of these cases right now. So there are a lot of people that have mishandled classified information. But this happens a lot, right? I mean, we found out that like Pence had documents that he shouldn't have, Biden has documents he shouldn't have, all sorts of cabinet secretaries. The fact that it happens so often tends to minimize the way the public considers it when it can be serious. What can be done to explain that away?
I think we should be much clearer about how presidents and ex-presidents and vice presidents, or how they can transfer documents for personal use, what documents, and there ought to be some kind of a minder, sadly, to go through papers to make sure that no classified materials are part of boxes of papers. I mean, what happened, as I understand it, in the Pence and Biden cases, is it was just sloppy. They didn't read the documents, they were found, and when they were found, they were turned back. In the Trump case, again, reportedly, allegedly, the stuff, according to him, was mixed up in his golf clothes. And so that seems a bit more deliberate. And there are, again, allegations that he intentionally took those documents out of boxes and waved them around in order to impress people at his golf clubs.
Now, he was president of the United States, and as such, and we've heard on many occasions that the president has the ability to declassify classified documents. Now, there's no evidence that he did so, but if he could have done so, then in principle, a mountain is being made of a molehill, or is that not true?
I think that's not true. I think if you believe, and I do, that there are important reasons to classify documents, just declassifying them at whim, if you have the power, is really bad practice. The problem has been that we don't have clear rules. I think if Congress can possibly work together, that there might be agreement in the future on what good rules could look like. Red lines around what you can do in terms of declassifying. I think at a minimum, you have to make a record in some form that you are declassifying, some list of documents. Trump did not do that. He said he thought about it in his mind. And in this recording that has just come out of him talking about some material on Iran.
This totally wins my case, Mm-hmm. Except it is like highly confidential, secret. As president, I could have declassified it. Now I can't, but this is classified.
He basically says after he has left the White House that he does not have authority to declassify it. So that rule is pretty well understood.
Leaving aside the ongoing 37 counts against Trump on these classification issues, which are the former American officials who have had the most serious charges of mishandling classified documents in your view, and why?
This new thing with this Erwin in Massachusetts.
From Massachusetts.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, again, a kid who wanted to show off.
Like 20 in his early 20s with access to documents that seems well above his pay grade, frankly.
Well, I mean, we have had, and we have to correct it again, a trusted system. We don't have that many people in it, but we have a trusted system. And that airbase no longer allows for, I think no longer has classified documents. It certainly doesn't allow for them to be transferred in any form. But it is a very difficult problem, a wicked problem. How do we control this, but also share crucial information? It's this tension between the need to know and the need to share. And I can argue that people who are in a position to stop harm to the United States need to get the information that gives them the tools to stop the harm.
Now, I noticed you didn't mention Hillary Clinton. And of course, if you're a Trump supporter right now, you're saying that the fact that Hillary has not been done up on charges while Trump is shows that the system has been delegitimized and that it's all political. What's your view of the mishandling of classified documents on Hillary Clinton, former Secretary of State's private laptop?
Well, as I understand it, that was used for her convenience, just to make it easier for her to access emails. But it wasn't appropriate. It was not on there are laptops appropriate to handle classified information, and there are some that are not. So it was on the wrong laptop. It was discovered accidentally, and it shouldn't have been there, this classified information. I don't know what the classified information was, but it was wrong. And I think, looking back on the incident, Hillary Clinton would have been advised to say at the front end, this was wrong, I made a mistake, this material is going right back to the federal government, it was sloppy practice, and I apologize.
So in other words, covering it up was the bigger transgression here.
Well, I don't know if they covered it up, but not addressing the issue.
Going back to Trump for a second, is the thing that most concerns you about Trump not the fact that he had all these documents, but the fact that he obstructed justice, the fact that he lied and instructed people to lie about it to the DOJ and the FBI?
What bothers me is that he, I think, and this has to be proved in court, knowingly took this information, knowingly marked it up, knowingly shared it with people. And I think while he was president, but certainly afterwards, it was not in secure places. And some of the information, allegedly, included information about our war plans on Iran. Well, excuse me, I hope we don't go to war with Iran, but I certainly don't want to read about it in the newspaper or have some guy who was a random golf buddy at Bedminster Golf Club in New Jersey. P.S., there may be additional charges against him in New Jersey because of this. I don't want some random golf guy to have information like this and blow up a situation where our national security is at risk.
Jane Harman, thanks so much for joining us today.
Always a pleasure.
Whistleblowing is nothing new. The country's first whistleblower case can be traced back to its founding. And it's a story I'm particularly fond of because it makes Rhode Island look bad. Regular viewers will know by now, our sixth season, that I do not consider it to be a state. Our villain is a man named Essex Hopkins, Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Navy during the Revolutionary War. Hopkins was born into one of the most prominent Rhode Island families, which is not exactly saying much, and he went to sea at the age of 20 as a privateer. He made a name for himself in 1765 by captaining the slave ship Sally from West Africa to the West Indies. It's a journey that killed 109 of the 196 slaves aboard. In one of our country's earliest instances of failing up, Hopkins' disastrous command of the Sally earned him the role of Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Navy, just as the Revolutionary War broke out. From the start of the war, Hopkins defied the Continental Congress's orders. In 1776, the Congress ordered Hopkins to clear the southern coast of British raiders and then to head north and do the same. But Hopkins had other ideas, sailing to the Bahamas to capture an undermanned British garrison. Sounds like more fun. Despite some wildly profitable exploits, Hopkins' disdain for his superiors and his penchant for disproportionately favoring Rhode Island with his spoils alienated him from the powers that were. But what sank his career was discontent from below decks. On February 19, 1777, 10 of his officers sent a petition to the Congress requesting Hopkins' removal from command. The petition cited not just the many instances that Hopkins defied congressional orders, but also painted a portrait of a self-serving and sadistic captain who, quote, treated prisoners in the most inhuman and barbarous manner, and also, quote, is oftener guilty of profane swearing than any jack tar that belongs to the ship. In 1778, the Congress dismissed an enraged Hopkins, who soon filed a criminal libel lawsuit against the 10 crewmen. 2 of those poor rascals happened to be in Rhode Island at the time, where Hopkins still held sway and were imprisoned. But not only did the Congress order their release, but soon after it passed the nation's first whistleblower protection law, stating that public servants had a duty to report wrongdoing, and they were protected in doing so. The Congress also covered the 2 imprisoned crewmen's legal fees, totaling $1,418, roughly $56,000 today. As for Hopkins, he remained a highly respected member of the Rhode Island community, continuing to serve on the state's General Assembly through 1786. And if you ever find yourself in Providence, you can visit his statue in, you guessed it, Hopkins Square. That's our show this week. Come back next week, and if you like what you see, or even if you don't, you know what's not a secret? You can take a minute to sign up for our most excellent morning newsletter. It's called GZERO Daily.